Good evening and welcome to the study session for July 7th, 2025. We have two topics tonight. Inclusionary housing is one, and number two is our Parks and Rec pathway design, or draft, sorry. We will start our meeting like we always do with public comments. I have nobody signed up to speak, so we will go ahead and go to item number one, which is our inclusionary housing zoning.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I'm going to turn it over to Lauren Nicolak, our Community Development Director.
Thank you. So tonight's topic is a continuation of a discussion we started around this time last year. We have been slow walking this topic forward, I would say, based on recommendations from the affordable housing strategy and feedback we've heard from the development community, and we had some time for a consultant to do some work. But the person who's leading that effort now is Shannon Terrell, our senior housing planner. She joined the organization in January. So I'd love for you to get to meet her, and then she'll summarize our findings and recommendations.
Thanks. Sorry. Thanks, Lauren. My name is Shannon, as Lauren mentioned. I'm the city's new senior housing planner. I started in January, continuing the work from the prior person before me. I have worked in Jefferson County now for 6 years, previously with the city of Lakewood, where I managed the city's community development block grant program and housing policy there. So I'm excited to kind of continue the conversation with you on this topic, and then we'll jump right in. So I'll just briefly touch on a high-level summary of the staff report, including the inclusionary feasibility study, and outline the 4 policy options that are in the memo. Tonight, really just trying to have a discussion with you all about what direction you guys want to move forward with on this policy based on some of the recommendations. So as you know, last June, I wasn't with you all, but you guys discussed inclusionary housing. We hired a consultant in August, and they wrapped up this feasibility study in the spring of this year, in April. So their analysis focused on several key components, including what income levels the policy should serve, how many affordable units each development should build, such as the set-aside requirement, that 10% number, the fee and lieu amounts as an alternative to on-site units, and whether inclusionary requirements would be financially viable or feasible given current market conditions. So our consultants tested 54 different pro forma models. Attachment 1 really only includes a fraction of those at 6. In doing so, the consultant really kind of came up with 3 main findings. Most future development will occur on small infill lots, which come with higher costs and more constraints. Financial feasibility is strained on projects with fewer than 60 units. These projects kind of face more cost challenges that make it hard to absorb the additional requirements. Higher density development could absorb these program requirements, but zoning and charter limits restrict how dense projects can be and what incentives the city can offer for a program. Despite these constraints, the consultant recommended a mandatory inclusionary policy. This is similar to the discussion we had last summer, that applies to new residential projects with 10 or more units. That would mean the rental projects would be required to provide 10% of units affordable at 80% AMI. For sale projects would be required to provide 10% affordable units at 100% AMI, which is area median income. Developers could opt to pay a fee in lieu instead of building the units at $58,000 per unit for rental and $97,000 per unit as for sale units. Our incentives are pretty limited to what the city can provide. So they were proposing expedited review, which is something we're considering and currently piloting, as well as urban renewal and TIF financing where applicable in some locations. Exemptions are pretty standard. Those would include sort of exempting deed restricted affordable projects that our housing authority currently provides, and those built by charitable organizations. The consultant estimates that over the next 10 to 15 years, this could produce almost 200 affordable units, mostly rental, or about $12 million towards the housing fund if developers choose to pay the fee in lieu. In preparation for tonight's meeting, staff took a deeper look at the feasibility analysis, conducted outreach with local developers, and reviewed historic development trends. These inputs kind of raise important questions on whether an inclusionary policy is the right fit for us right now. With this context in mind, staff has outlined 4 policy options for council to consider. One being adopt the full inclusionary zoning program that our consultant recommended. 2 would be scale back the inclusionary requirements for smaller developments, less than 60 units. 3rd is a new strategy, which would be a linkage fee study. This would apply more broadly to all development, including commercial. And then the 4th option would be to take no action at this time. In doing this and in prep for this meeting, we really wanted to look at the goal of identifying a solution that helps to advance the city's affordability housing goals without discouraging housing production. So the table in front of you has the 4 options mentioned in the memo, kind of summarized based on applicability, benefits, and trade-offs of each policy, including the estimated revenue it would generate over 10 years. Options 1 and 2 follow the traditional path of an inclusionary policy, which have the benefits of producing actual on-site affordable units or generating funds for our housing fund. Option 2 specifically reduces the burden on smaller developments, which is what we're seeing in our feasibility analysis. Option 3 introduces a new strategy, a linkage fee. Unlike inclusionary, linkage fees do not directly create affordable units, so that would strictly be for the benefit of generating funds for the housing fund or a secondary source. We think that the linkage fee would apply more broadly to all development, kind of creating a shared responsibility of housing and affordability. And option 4 is really to take no action at this time, knowing that if council doesn't want to take action, we still get short-term rental revenue. So that's still an option. We think, though, that the revenue may not be enough to really meaningfully provide to projects that are seeing really big gaps in financing. And with that, our staff recommendation is really option number 3. We think at this time that option 1 and 2 would make projects infeasible, all residential projects infeasible, specifically the missing middle housing types that we're trying to diversify our housing stock. Option 4 is an option 2, and we can choose to kind of revisit this conversation in a year if the market changes. But we don't recommend options 1 or 2 at this time. To kind of help guide the discussion tonight, I think we're asking council 2 main questions. One being, does council still want to explore a long-term sustainable funding source for the housing fund beyond short-term rental revenue? And if yes, would you like staff to pause work on that inclusionary zoning framework and instead explore a linkage fee? And then with that, I'll kind of open it up to council for questions. That might have been a really quick overview, but hopefully you guys read the memo and have some questions.
All right, thank you. We'll go with Councilor Ohm first.
Thank you for that presentation. I know that I think Denver has a little bit different where they do inclusionary for residential, but then commercial is linkage. So this is linkage for residential and commercial?
Yes, is
Okay.
what we're proposing, yeah, for option 3. But of course, the linkage fee would require a nexus study. And so the results of the nexus study could say residential only, commercial only, or both.
Okay. I think that's it for me.
Councilor Hoppy?
Thank you. Thanks for your presentation. Can you briefly describe what we are doing with the funding that we have in our housing fund currently?
You want me to speak to that?
Yeah.
Yes, Councilwoman Hoppy. Currently, it pays for Shannon's salary. And we did use, if you remember, 400,000 about a year or maybe 2 years ago already for a contribution to Foothills Regional Housing to help with the purchase of the Vance Street lofts. Otherwise, we are still working on additional programming that maybe could come out of the funds. We haven't gotten there yet, though. This is the first step. And Lauren, you got something to add to
Yeah,
that?
I think the challenge in adding more programs right now is that the fund balance is just fairly low, and we don't want to rely on potential future revenues until we either know we're going to keep STRs in that fund or augment that in some other way. So trying to focus on sources for uses.
Is then like updating our current affordable housing in the community still part of that, still part of our plan? It was one of the suggestions in the study.
Yes, sort of the preservation of naturally occurring affordable housing. So the grant that we received, the $2 million grant for that, is likely to go exclusively to long-term deed restriction for the Fruitdale School lofts. If we can build more of a fund balance, then we can come back to council and say, we have options. We can pursue a more broad NOAA program, or we can do first-time homebuyer down payment assistance, sort of a wide range of options for what we could do. But we're not pursuing NOAA outside of the Fruitdale School lofts at this time.
So if we do pursue a linkage fee, is a linkage fee something that can only go into an affordable housing fund, or would it be something that could support maybe some capital improvement projects around development, which like if we're supporting some capital improvement projects around like some employment development, realizing that we would probably need affordable housing for the employees of that employment development, or can it only go towards specifically affordable housing?
Yeah, I think my understanding of a linkage fee is that it's based on the impact and growth. So if the study identifies the need for housing, then the fees would go towards that impact. I think over time, it can be flexible. Council can kind of choose which direction it wants to go, where that fund will go based on the priorities of city council.
Would it be something that we could work with our urban renewal authority on around potential projects that will come into some of our renewal areas?
That I don't know how it works with them.
And would that only be because we're calling it a linkage fee?
Yeah, you have to be careful that the fee is going back towards funding what you studied as the true nexus. You could open up that study more to see if there's a fee needs to be put on development for all kinds of things, but you want to make sure that you have valid proof that that fee is going for a certain impact of that development.
Yeah,
So-
we hear them called impact fees sort of more broadly. So some communities have a traffic impact fee or an infrastructure impact fee or a housing impact fee. So we were really just looking at it through the lens of the housing fund. But if the interest is to sort of broaden the potential uses, then we need to broaden the scope of the Nexus study.
Okay, so but that is doable. We can broaden the scope of the study. Okay, I think I'm done for now.
Before we move on to maybe just to add to the housing fund, we are negotiating with two developers right now on a couple of residential projects and asking them to provide cash donation to our housing fund. So there are additional revenue sources as we speak. It's above and beyond inclusionary zoning requirement, but any project that we provide any type of TIF or urban renewal subsidies to, we ask them to either provide affordable units or give us money. So we're hoping to have an inflow of some revenues in the next year.
And just to follow up with that, and one of those is like $1 million or something coming from the American Motel.
That's our ask, yep.
Yep, okay. Okay, so then I guess I do have, no, I'll wait for now, thanks.
We'll go to Counselor Dozeman online.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So one of my first questions is if staff can remind us of how much this feasibility study cost, and then also if we were to move forward on next steps for an impact fee, what that cost would look like.
Was the first question how much the feasibility study cost?
Yes.
I think we did a not to exceed of either $30,000 or $40,000. Now I'm forgetting off the top of my head.
If we want to come in at 25,000 was the contract?
That could be,
Ish.
I can look that up.
25,000-ish, Leah?
Okay, and then if we were to do another study, what would that cost look like?
Yeah, the cost of a linkage fee study would be around $55,000.
And what would the timeline look like for that?
I would say the timeline would probably be around 6 to 8 months for that study, depending on when we start and selection of consultants and everything and their timeline.
Okay, and then one other question I had was in regards to like the developer kind of feedback and input. Like, can you briefly summarize the comments and thoughts from that industry?
Yeah, I think the conversations with developers was pretty short, but it also, a lot of them said the same thing, which were that the impact of an inclusionary fee would sort of be put on the residents, specifically the renters and the buyers, so it increased the cost of housing. Another thing we heard was that smaller developers really can't absorb the additional cost. I think there's an economies of scale when there's larger developments, they can kind of spread the cost among all the units. The third thing was that I think right now the market is really volatile, and I think in the discussion last summer, we kind of spoke to that too. I think mortgage rates, while they're kind of going up and down, they're still really high. Material costs are really high. Tariffs are really increasing those costs, and the margins are really tight right now. And so those are kind of making developments risky to invest in right now. And so the additional cost of an inclusionary program would kind of make those margins tighter. And then the last thing is that developers kind of said that in cities where other inclusionary zoning are in effect, they're avoiding development in those cities just because those requirements are too high. So I think there's a need to kind of find the middle ground for that and find a solution that kind of can keep that fee low while still generating enough to support our goals.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. We'll go to Councilor Holteen.
Thank you, everyone. So I think I have a couple of questions, but I think the first one is, so I'm generally in favor of the linkage fee. Would the study look at the recommended linkage fee that's in our packet, or would it look at a couple of different linkage fee scenarios for the Nexus study? And then I have a second question, but I'll start with that one.
Yeah, I think the linkage fee would kind of start on our findings and then expand because we would be looking at commercial development as well. So that would have to be an additional study. And I think every consultant does their pro forma analysis differently. So it would probably, in some ways, kind of restart the residential feasibility analysis as well, if that answers your question.
Yeah, that helps. And then the second question is, how would this timing align with the rollout of Lutheran campus redevelopment? If we were to go with linkage study to come back in 6 to 8 months.
I think when we decide to make anything effective is a policy choice. What we've been doing so far, including at the Lutheran campus, and as Patrick describes, is that any major redevelopment has been asked to negotiate affordability through separate agreements. So when we see the linkage fee, if there's a decision to make it applicable to say anything that hasn't submitted a site plan or starting in 18 months to give people notice, that would be a choice that we would have, or you would have as a council.
Okay, and so Lauren, if I'm hear if I'm interpreting what you said correctly, that like moving forward with Lutheran, we'd already be talking about incorporating affordability into it regardless of any policy right now that's adopted.
Correct. Yeah, we have been talking to the Lutheran buyer about incorporating affordability, hopefully through units, because that's a big enough project. It could absorb that.
Okay. I'll probably have more to add as this discussion evolves. But I think I'll share now that, we adopted our housing affordability action plan. And I think I feel really proud of how much this council has accomplished on that in a very short period of time. But I feel like Patrick provided some helpful updates on where some of the funds are kind of flowing around that we've received, through federal grants and other sources. But I guess my feeling, something that's important to me as this moves forward, if we're looking at a 10-year revenue fund that's going to be registering, at $10 million-ish, how are we, managing that? Does it become a special fund? How do we, as council, set more specific like policy priorities around that? So I think for me, as we move forward in this conversation, I'm really interested in not just how are we getting the revenue and how much revenue, but then how are we prioritizing? And we had talked previously, and I believe it's on a future study session around, ensuring that the short-term rental revenue, goes towards the housing fund. So anyway, just sharing a couple of thoughts that are immediately tangential to this conversation. Thanks.
Yeah, if I could speak to that just real quickly. Councilwoman Holstein, you're spot on. We are doing everything we can as promised and as directed by council to make sure that short-term rental lodger fees are directed back to the housing fund starting next year. And then it's always been our intention that we come back to council with additional priorities of how to use the housing funds. That will be a next step, this inclusionary housing, and with staff turnover, we just haven't gotten to that piece yet. So we're looking forward to that conversation.
Thanks for the update, Patrick.
All right, thank you. We'll go to Councilor Snell.
Actually, my question was answered with Councilor Holtein's question, so thank you.
Excellent.
We'll go to Councilor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And two background questions, one of which is already asked, and I appreciate that. The other one is there's reference to state of Colorado legislation. What is required of the city of Wheat Ridge to comply?
Regarding the state legislation, there's not a requirement. There's just suggested affordability strategies that are kind of in the state housing bills. And we're hoping to kind of dive deeper into those in August. But one of those affordability strategies is an inclusionary zoning program.
I think the other component that I think you referenced state legislation. So nexus studies or linkage fees are required to pass certain requirements in state statute and are also required to comply with certain Supreme Court decisions so that there is sort of the rational and proportional relationship between the fee charged and the development maintained or constructed. So it's a little bit outside of our wheelhouse, which is why we'd need a consultant, but there are state laws and Supreme Court rulings that dictate the content of the linkage study and ultimately sort of the dollar amount of the linkage study, if that's what you're referring to as well.
Yeah. Well, is Nexus a person? Who's a Nexus? Is it like a type of study, or is it a company that does the study?
It's a good question. So in this context, it's a term that comes from a Supreme Court ruling, but it's essentially, is there a proportional relationship between a dollar figure and a development that's being constructed? There have been patterns of cities that have exacted too much from development, either in requirements or fees, and the term, I think, originates from that Supreme Court decision that we now say we have to do a nexus study, which means prove that there's a nexus between what you're requiring and what's being built and the goal you're trying to achieve. But there's any number of economists or other financial consultants who sort of specialize in meeting those requirements of that study.
And The other part of the question then gets, when we talk about linkage fees, and we talk about the market in general, because there's options 1 and 2 refer to how residential development and the economics around that, and everything I've seen lately shows that the market is going through a shift right now. I understand that there are more houses on the market now, and they're staying on the market longer. Prices have slid in some areas, they've stabilized in others. So I am concerned that if we turn away from the housing focus of these fees, that the market will get ahead of us. And I just want to kind of bring that up. I'm not sure exactly what we could do, because these things take months and months to kind of play out. But if we happen to see maybe not as serious a correction as we saw back in 2008, but if we do see a market correction and prices come down, what effect would that have on our sort of the approach we take to the requirements of residential developers?
I can start and then, I think that's a really good point. I think some economists and consultants argue that if you kind of start an inclusionary or some sort of fee when the market's low, that when it's back up, it's captured in that way. So there's definitely a benefit of doing that. I think the other thing though is I think Wheat Ridge doesn't have a strong real estate market, and it doesn't have the units that maybe other cities kind of develop. And so when we think about the effects of an inclusionary, it might have more profound effects on Wheat Ridge's market in comparison to other cities that maybe have a stronger residential market.
Yeah, I think one of our goals is to establish a fee that does not require a high amount of maintenance. So one approach could be to set the fee based on the current market and know that you have to look at it every 6 to 12 months. We did that, for example, with the fee in lieu of parkland dedication. We set that fee in lieu super, super low, and it's stayed the same for almost 10 years now. And that's been okay. It's a very small fee. It's $2,000 per unit, but it builds up over time. To Shannon's point, we know that if Denver is going to do a linkage and an inclusionary fee, it's because no developer is going to say, well, forget it, I'm not building in Denver anymore. They're going to pay that fee because the market is so strong there compared to these smaller peer communities where folks can choose Wheat Ridge or Arvada or Englewood. And then the other thing that we looked at is that we had not done last year was sort of this crystal ball exercise, and Shannon summarizes it in the study. What is the development sort of potential, excluding Lutheran, in Wheat Ridge? We all know our border is sort of set, and there are diminishing opportunities for development or redevelopment. And so we sort of ask ourselves, is the juice worth the squeeze? On one hand, capitalize on those, let's call it 2,000 units and set the fee in place so we can at least get something out of those. But our concern was, there's a potential that we freeze any of that development potential if we sort of miscalibrate this fee. And I think because our goal in the affordable housing strategy, and we've all sort of read it through different lenses probably, was to create more housing at sort of a wide range of options and levels. We didn't say we need more housing only at 60% AMI. So if our goal is to sort of support housing options across the spectrum, I think our concern is that if we ask housing to pay for housing, all housing options will start to diminish in terms of the development pace or pattern. And if we had infinitely more production potential, I think inclusionary could make a lot of sense. That's what Denver has. They have different zoning, different density, and different opportunities than we do. So we just haven't found a similar community that has figured this out and not had a unintended chilling effect on the potential diversification of their housing stock. So I think you're right. Like if we put it in place now, then we're not going to miss opportunities. Our housing production has slowed, I would say, significantly in the last 2 years. We see that in our building permit revenue as a result of the market forces. So it's a good moment in time to sort of slow walk this forward and try to create an approach that is resilient to market forces over the next 10 years and still achieves your goals.
Well, that helps a lot. Thank you. I do have one other thing on linkage, though. Is there a way that, as we look at linkage to commercial developments and the types of commercial developments, that applying a flat $4 per square foot fee, if we could build some flexibility into it, because the first example that jumps in my head is the big warehouse out on I-70 that was built not too long ago, and the warehouse probably employs maybe a dozen people during a good day, and it's 142,000 square feet. And if I was developing a new warehouse and I looked at a $4 per square foot, when I have 12 people working there, I'd have second thoughts.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you might have an office coming in, and they'll have, you know, a number of, say, 25 people working in there in a fairly small space. Then yes, that would be the potential for creating pressure on the housing market. Not everybody that works in Wheat Ridge lives in Wheat Ridge, and the other point to make there. So I just would ask that maybe we consider some sort of flexibility on the linkage for the type of development. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you. We'll go back to Councilor Ohm.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And thank you, Director Mikulak, because I had a lot of those same ideas about the diminishing, like how big is Wheat Ridge, how much available land do we have to develop. And a couple points I want to make was that I think we're doing a lot of good things for the city, but I do realize is that as we're trying to move towards being compliant with what the state wanted for those carrots, some of that was leverage, you know, to the developer. So we're, you know, if we're asking the developer like, hey, we want you to pay money, you know, we could have offered like, hey, we'll reduce your parking requirements. We've taken that off the table. And so I'm just wondering, and I don't need to answer right now, but I'm wondering, you know, what does the developer get? So it's like right now they don't have to worry about, you know, the minimum parking requirements. There's so many things I think that we're moving towards that we just can't, I think we've lost a little leverage with that developer, and you know, we're gonna, if it's affordable housing, we're supposed to do more review. I know that I'm very aware that when, at some point, if this does become, you know, some type of code, that there will be probably a deadline of when that takes effect. And the cautionary tale from Denver was all the developers knew that, and then they had a huge surplus of people trying to get it in for that deadline. And then we're going to be doing the other thing, which is, well, we got to get your affordable housing in even faster, but now we just increased our workflow, whatever that number was, double or 3 times. And then that kind of hit that peak, and then it went down, and that's kind of what's happening. But it took a long time to go through that. So that's one idea, and I'm not against what we're proposing with the linkage fee. The other thing is, so let's say we get the linkage fee, we're going to do the affordable housing. Is the affordable housing, is that only going to be for people to rent this affordable housing, or are we looking for home ownership as well? And if it's the second, have we thought about doing what Boulder County is interested in doing, which is fractionalized ownership? Because, and I don't know if everybody understands what that is, but it's something that they do a lot in commercial. Director Mikulak probably could explain it a lot better than I could, but those are my 2 ideas, because I want to make sure that a lot of people they're not going to have the money to buy. They want to buy something and get all that rent cycle. And I just want to keep all our options on the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Hoppe?
Thank you. I mean, in general, I'm supportive of the linkage fee. I very much would like for us to, you know, kind of leaning in a little bit onto what Councilwoman Hulteen said, you know, making sure that the Nexus has a broad enough scope that this could go into a special fund that we could then start looking at policy and priorities and how to utilize that money through the special fund and have affordable housing be a piece of that. There's a lot of services that are needed around affordable housing also that are supportive services. And so we would have some flexibility to be able to help and have some incentives around that. And on top of being supportive of the linkage fee, but also wanting it to, the scope to be broad enough that we have some room to make some moves in it. I very much would like to see a policy, a permanent policy that says that the short-term rental monies do go into the affordable housing. So that is a dedicated source into the affordable housing, and then the linkage fee could be a piece of that. And knowing that the short-term rentals over in the next 10 years, the short-term rental tax revenue over the next 10 years would be up to 4 million. We have a potential 1 million getting added to that in a one lump sum. We have some other potentials that could add some one-time lump sums into that. I just want to make sure that we have some sort of policy that short-term rental tax revenue stays with the affordable housing, and that when we get those lump sums, we can lump those into that, and then we have a broad enough scope to be able to do some sort of special fund with the linkage fee is really what I'm hoping we'll come to consensus with for tonight.
Thank you. Counselor Hulteen.
Thank you. I am in agreement with Councilmember Hoppe, and I think to Councilmember Ohm's, points and always good suggestions is, we've got I'll reference it again, our housing affordability action plan, and it's focused not just on building affordable apartments. It's really doing that comprehensive work. So I think it's what I like about the linkage fee. We do have good policy. We do have good opportunities. Right now, we're really, blessed with a talented council and a, tenured city manager who's got, a lot of skill. I mean, we have a lot of talent sitting around the table, literally tonight, except for Lee and I are virtual. But, we're going to have a almost 50% turnover of council, things change. So I agree, creating some sort of policy around, where housing funds go is helpful while still maintaining some of that flexibility. And I do like Councilmember Hoppe's suggestion around broadening the scope of the nexus a little bit, because if we're doing a linkage fee on commercial properties, we're also looking at, commercial properties as I've been up since 3 o'clock this morning. I'm really not at my sharpest tonight. My apologies. I mean, the way we're investing in our community for accessible housing, does also spill over into, how we're doing our corridors and how, people live in affordable housing and can get where they need to go for jobs and school and services. So I don't have much, experience or expertise in how that translates into a nexus study, but I am interested in that broadening that the Councilmember Hoppe was mentioning that maybe could touch urban renewal a little bit. But sorry, that was a long rambling lead up to a question. Would these kind of funds end up falling under the jurisdiction of our housing authority? Like where would you see these funds sitting?
Sure. So council created actually a special fund already a couple years ago now that we're calling the Wheat Ridge Housing Fund. That is a city fund, not a housing authority fund. And so that's where we've been putting the short-term rental revenues and where we'd envision that a longer-term source would end up. I think our desire within the year is to talk to the housing authority and you all about pivoting that group to potentially other roles, whether they're an advisory committee as it relates to that fund, the way that we have other boards and commissions, or what sort of that, we'd like to activate them more. And so we want to brainstorm what that role could look like. But I don't know that they would have sole control over the housing fund because I do think it's important that it stays aligned with council policy.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Councilor Dozman.
Thank you. So without having implemented this legislation and policy thus far, I heard Patrick, you say that you're discussing with developers, donations or cash towards our affordability. How are those conversations going? And can you kind of speak to, I don't know, that carrot?
Sure. Again, since we don't have an inclusionary zoning at this point, we can't require it. But anytime the city provides any type of funding or subsidies, we have leverage, and we ask them to either consider a certain number of units of affordability in their project, or cash for our housing fund, which we could use for affordable housing projects. It depends on the scale and size of the building or the project. We've gone back and forth with one project right now that it's difficult for them to fit this money into their performance sometimes, but we're holding firm on both of them. We have, I think, just two right now. It could be close to $1.5 million between them both. And, we can use that money. It could go much further, we believe, in the housing fund. As an example, again, we put $400,000 towards a 24-unit building, which is all affordable units in the city. We, as a city and our housing authority, we're not developers. We don't have enough capacity or money to build buildings or projects. It's better to partner with people who can. And so I'm not sure if that answers your question, but that's where we're at on those two projects.
And maybe just one more note, that approach comes directly out of the affordable housing strategy. There was a lot of content in there, but one of the specific policy directions was incentives are conditioned on inclusionary outcomes. It basically said, sort of, unless and until you create a more formal, formulaic pathway to funding the housing fund, if you're a financial partner in a project, make sure you're achieving some of your city goals. So if that's, historically, it's maybe achieving certain density or a mixed use. And so what we've been doing with the residential projects is saying, hey, we've got this housing strategy. It's council's, policy direction to try to achieve some inclusionary outcomes. Are you willing to build any units? Yes or no? Often no, and that's okay. If not, then we'd like to negotiate a fee in lieu. And because we don't have a formula, and because we're in the world of sort of contracts, we don't have the same law that's dictating that negotiation. And so we've essentially asked for as much as the pro forma can absorb, and that's been different project to project.
Okay, thank you. I will say that I've really appreciated staff's approach on this issue and that we have walked slowly. I think, this is really an economic issue of supply and demand. We had a lot of demand and not enough supply, and we've been seeing cities all around us, including ourselves, have more development. And I think the market is stabilizing, but there are a lot of variables and factors that are still volatile at this point in time, as mentioned earlier in regards to tariffs, costs associated with building and construction. And I think at this point in time, I think I would prefer to just hold off on an impact or linkage fee. I think the market really isn't sustainable to have those margins be minimized any further than they already have been. And I think that we've done a wonderful job at supporting affordable projects and partnering with organizations like the Foothills Regional Housing to make projects become a reality. And I like the approach that we've taken. And I don't want to see us pay another $50,000 and spend another 6 or 8 months continuing to study this and then have it impact construction and development even more. I hadn't ever agreed with implementing inclusionary zoning, so I was grateful that staff's recommendations kind of moved away from that. But I've been supportive of other initiatives in trying to increase our housing fund and us trying to adopt a strategy around maintaining affordability. But I don't see this as necessary at this point in time, especially if developers are already willing to work with us. And I understand that because we don't have it in law, we don't necessarily have teeth to that. But I would prefer to hold off for a year to kind of see how things naturally evolve and see where we're at then at that point, to kind of move forward with this. Thank you.
Seeing nobody else, I'll go back to Councilor Hoppy to wrap us up.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Because of the way we're currently doing it as a short-term kind of gap fill, gap stop, I am going to ask for consensus that we move forward with a linkage fee and look at broadening the scope for the Nexus, while also bringing forward some sort of policy around protecting the short-term rental tax revenue into specifically the Affordable Housing Fund. And that once we get the results of the Nexus, then we will move forward on looking at where we can find some priorities in our prioritize some of our policies around utilizing those funds.
I believe we have a consensus on that.
Thank you.
Excellent. Anything else on item number 1? All right. Then we will move on to item number 2, which is our Parks and Recreation Pathway Draft.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Karen O'Donnell is going to pull up the presentation. I'll let her introduce the item here in a second.
Good evening, Council. We are here to give you an update on the Parks and Recreation Pathway, which I believe you all know is an update to our 10-year master plan. Just a few things that I want to mention before I introduce our consultant is that this, what's being shared with you this evening is very much in the draft form. This is the first draft that came to me. I haven't even reviewed it with the staff yet, but wanted to bring it to you for an opportunity to provide feedback at a point before we come to you with a final presentation for adoption. So just wanted to share that. Definitely open to feedback and suggestions this evening. And also mentioning that there's a lot of information throughout this document. And so this is very much a pared down, summarized version. So I know JR could talk for probably an hour on each slide, but he's not going to. But just obviously, as with any presentation, if you have questions and want to go into more detail on any particular slide, we will certainly come back to that and answer the questions that you have. And then also wanted to just provide a reminder that we adopted our open space management plan in May of 2023. So you may have some questions that are more related to that and the level of detail that goes into that particular plan. And this is just a little different, and JR can talk about, you know, how they're different but related as well. Just wanted to make mention of that. And with that, I will introduce J.R. Clanton. J.R. is our project manager with Barry Dunn, and Barry Dunn was selected as the consultant to update our Wheat Ridge Parks and Recreation Pathway. J.R.
Thank you, Karen. Well, hello, everyone. It's great to be here tonight talking to you about Wheat Ridge Parks and Recreation. A little bit about our firm, Barry Dunn. We are a consulting firm, and we specialize in all sorts of consulting services, but our practice is the Parks, Recreation, Libraries practice. And we help agencies like Wheat Ridge all over the country do these types of plans. We did have partners on this plan that I wanted to mention. Populous helped with the facility assessment and as well as costing for facility improvements. They're a consulting, an architect firm, a big one out of Denver. RVI is helping out with capital costing for the parks capital recommendations. And then ETC Institute was our partner for the statistically valid survey. Overview of what we're gonna go, Overview of what we're gonna go over tonight. Like Karen said, it really is high level. The findings are presented in a high level format. There are specific details that are gonna be included in detail in the reports that are associated with this master plan, but to make it digestible, it really is a high level overview today. The way the presentation and really the master plan is structured is it's designed to say, why are the recommendations for the future of the Parks and Recreation Department why are they what they are? What is the authority behind these recommendations? And the authority behind the recommendations in this plan is community engagement, extensive community input and engagement, coupled, and from that we get both quantitative and qualitative data, coupled with several different analyses that took place to review the current system and operations, as well as facilities. So once we set the framework for all of the different work that was done to assess the current conditions of the department, then we can talk about what is it that the department could do in the future to really move forward. And those are grouped into strategic priorities, which are high-level priorities that the department can focus on, as well as specific capital recommendations, so major capital projects. Thank you. Thank you. So project purpose and goals. So we've been, one of the things we wanted to do was really look at the language that the department is using to describe its plan and really move on from master plan and distribute and move on to something different, something that it talks about the community's role in this plan, as well as what it means for Wheat Ridge moving forward. And so this plan is actually going to be called the Pathway. And so moving forward in this presentation, I'll refer to it as the Pathway. Really wanted a plan that was rooted heavily in public engagement. We also wanted it to have a lot of quantitative data to inform recommendations for future facilities and services, and then to integrate all of that different information to a planning document. The process we followed, we've been working with you all for about a year now, and there's been a lot of steps to this project. Right now, we're in 5, and we're about to transition into 6. So we've done all the different assessments and analyses. We've done an extensive community and internal engagement campaign, and we've synthesized these into findings, as well as developed capital recommendations. So let's talk about some of the findings. So as far as community engagement goes, I apologize. Thank you. We really wanted robust community engagement. So what we did was we worked with staff to develop a community engagement strategy that works for City of Wheat Ridge. What are the types of engagement efforts we can do in Wheat Ridge that make sense? How do we reach underserved populations instead of just hearing from the power users we know will attend every function we have at a rec center? And how can we reach people where they are? We really wanted to get out and reach people. And so with this, we developed a branding called Growing Together, Plant Your Ideas, for the Wheat Ridge Parks and Recreation Pathway. You may remember having seen some of these materials. And then we were present throughout different community events. one of the things we found is that if you say, okay, we're going to have an open house here, please come, you don't necessarily get a great turnout, especially if you want to reach people who are, again, the aforementioned power users. So we were at various city events all throughout the summer and fall, including the Carnation Festival, and there we are at the rec center. We also did some fun engagement with different groups. So for instance, the summer camps, and we had the kids draw their ideal parks. And some of them were exceptionally creative, and some of them were really, really detailed. So it was really just a fun example. And there's lots of different community engagement things that we did. Yeah, thank you. Sorry about that. And so through those community engagement efforts at events, we received over 1,000 filled out comment cards, which is just incredible. That's the most comment cards we've had filled out with any of our engagements, and it's happening from Wheat Ridge. So that was really cool. The other thing I'll say about Wheat Ridge's engagement, which was really neat, was just how passionate people were about the community and how much they identified with the community, which for being, again, a small community in a major urban center, it's pretty amazing how much residents truly have pride in Wheat Ridge and really identified themselves as City of Wheat Ridge residents. Through social media, we had thousands of impressions and reached thousands of people, and so also really powerful effort. So all of these were to get anecdotal feedback, to get feedback from the community, meeting them where they were. But we also coupled this with, next slide, a survey, a statistically valid survey. And so with this, we wanted to send surveys to a random sampling of City of Wheat Ridge residents and get their input on the future of Parks and Recreation Wheat Ridge. And really the randomness is what it makes this thing powerful, because through random sampling and statistics, you can end up getting very high confidence that you've reached the majority makeup of the city. And so the goal was 300 households. It usually takes a couple of mailings to get to this goal. And City of Wheat Ridge hit it with the first mailing within the first month with 414 completed surveys. It's pretty incredible. So again, just speaking to how interested the community was and how much people really value it. So what did we find out from all of these things? People really like your system, especially your trails and open spaces. People are supportive of investments and expansions of your facilities. They're also supportive and desire program expansions. Your events are exceptionally popular, and they want to see continued investment and utilization of community events. Next slide, please. No, it's okay. Yep. Safety and accessibility improvements were emphasized, especially ADA, access to facilities, and better lighting and safer crossings. Aquatics enhancements were also emphasized. Youth-oriented amenities scored well, and they normally do, but definitely there was a priority on that. And then improved communication channels. And every single community we work with, this rates as a priority. People, when you serve a diverse community, they have a diverse range of preferences for getting their information and getting communicated to. And so the key here is to just make sure you are continuing to use a wide variety of communication methods to reach people. So then we get into, so that's what we heard from community engagement. So then we get into some of the analytical assessments we did. So the first thing we did was an operations assessment, and this had 4 key components: an organizational assessment, a recreation assessment, a demographics analysis, and then benchmarking. All of these are designed to give you insights on where you could best make investments, or at least have discussions around and making investments over the next 10 years of your department. Yes, please. So we'll start with the organizational assessment. So this reviewed the department structure and staffing. It also looked at its budget and its historic budget trends. And to try to get some context for those, it also compared it to NRPA, so the National Recreation and Park Association benchmarks and metrics. And some of the ones we looked at were per capita spending, as well as staffing levels and operating costs per acres. All of these comparison points, again, are conversation starters. There will always be reasons behind why Wheat Ridge has made the investments it's made compared to other organizations. And the reasons are always valid. You're responding to your local community, your local needs with the assets you have. And honestly, the geography also makes a big difference. And so all of these things, again, as you're looking at these comparisons, it's important to not get hung up on the specifics around, oh my gosh, we're lower or we're higher than the national average. What's important is to have the discussion about why Wheat Ridge is at where it's at, and then assess the service level based on that. So what are some of the organizational findings? The comparison group is populations below 50,000, and Wheat Ridge actually has above average staffing levels for its Parks and Recreation Department to support its broad service delivery. With this, it has higher than average proportion of staff dedicated to recreation services, which aligns with the community's demand for the variety of services you provide. There is an underinvestment in an administrative staff compared to your peers. And this affects ability to do things such as planning, administration in general, pursuing grants, those sorts of things. There's efficient parkland operations, but you are below the median spending per acre. There's strong, but with that, there's also strong per capita investment in parks and recreation. The operating budget has seen sustained growth over the last few years, which is good. And the organization structure is generally strong, and it supports a clear division of responsibilities. So you do have a good organization structure. Generally speaking, you have good alignment with the national benchmarks, with local priorities being reflected. So overall, the organizational assessment finds that the department is operating well. There are areas to consider new investments, but overall, it's operating well. Next is the recreational assessment. Yeah. I know, it's a little. So this one's focused specifically on your recreation services and facilities. And it looks at program metrics, and it looks at your participation data, cancellation rates, and program life cycle stages. So it really is a holistic approach of your offerings in recreation and how they're performing. And so with this, there was, you have a really broad range of services offered. You are definitely above average for your comparison group with just the different types of programs you're offering. And it's great because this community survey supports that, and the community wants these services. If anything, what they want is even more. You have really strong participation levels in fitness, active adult, and enrichment programs. Your biggest barrier is limited space. It's a huge barrier. The life cycle, so that looks at how many of your programs are new, returning, and old. And a lot of times communities that aren't high performing have too many of their programs in the old. We're just offering the same things we've always offered, and that's not Wheat Ridge. You have a good distribution of your programs, so you're trying new things and you're phasing out stuff when it's appropriate to phase them out. And from a revenue perspective, your breadwinners are youth and adult programs. You also have a financial assistance program to improve equity. And community feedback supports focus on fitness, nature, and cultural programs. Demographic study, we looked at population, age, income data using 2024 census data. But then what we do is we don't just look at current snapshot, we do look at projections. as well as previous years in order to try to get some context and some idea for where Wheat Ridge might be planning. So some of the general findings are that you are not expecting much growth. You have a stable population. You are a little bit older median age compared to state and national levels. However, your youth population is expected to grow. Your household income is below the state average, and you have a trend of increasing racial and ethnic diversity. Now, what I will say is we're seeing this increasing racial and ethnic diversity trend happening pretty universally with our clients. And a lot of that is because this information is self-reported. And what you're seeing in the major changes in population is you're seeing people changing how they self-identify. So certainly you are having growth in your racial and ethnic diversity. You are also having growth in people choosing to identify themselves differently. And so if you look at this information, it's important to keep that in mind. Finally, we had benchmarking with peer communities. And again, it's just to provide conversation points. We tried to choose communities that are analogous to you in both population and geography. Again, geography plays, it plays a huge role in how many service centers you need to have, as well as the types of services you're providing. So the key peers are Wheat Ridge is Wheat Ridge, Golden, Inglewood, Erie, Windsor. And then looking outside of Colorado, we have Sierra Vista in Arizona and Farmington in New Mexico. Some of the key findings were you have a compact footprint, perhaps a little bit more compact geographic footprint than some of it. Wheat Ridge had the lowest staffing ratio among peer agencies, a smaller operating budget, but it's had substantial capital investments in recent years. And that's going to fluctuate based upon, is this a year of capital outlay or not? Mid-range with revenue generation with some potential for cost recovery increases. Per capita expenditures were below average, but your comprehensive program menu, again, exceeded peers. So if I had to give you the Reader's Digest version of this, you're punching outside your weight class with your peers. You're doing really well. So that's the organizational assessment. So then we look at service levels, and service levels are specific to your parks and facilities. This is what we're talking about. And the way that we at Barry Dunn look at your parks levels of service is we're not interested in just saying, how many parks do you have near people? We're really interested in what amenities are near people or what people have access to. And we always like to show this picture here because if you just looked on a map, you might say, oh yeah, there's a park with a playground here. But the quality of those parks can really vary depending on what's offered there and how easy it is to access it. And so if you go to the next slide, you'll see that we look at features, recreation features. So number and components of not just playgrounds, but also pavilions, tables, trash cans, comfort and support amenities. Are there restrooms? Is there shade? Is there parking? Accessibility and convenience. So can someone not only access entrance into the park, but then can they move around the park and access the different amenities? Aesthetics and environment are also looked at, and as well as overall maintenance and usability. And when you look at it, for Wheat Ridge, we scored 307 components at 21 different facilities. Yeah, and these are the different ones. So what are some of the scoring things we saw? Your parks, generally speaking, scored well for their size. You have a strong mix of parks and you have broad geographic coverage with them. Your amenities and trail connectivity are common recommendation points. And several parks scored low due to limited features, specifically around gaps in accessibilities and some amenities. But generally speaking, your parks are in good condition. There are opportunities for improvements, but this is not a situation where we're coming in and having to do a deep sigh as we explain what's happening with your parks. They're in good condition. So the key is, how do you maintain them smartly? And what investments can you make to continue to make sure they stay in good condition? This is another interesting component of this assessment, which was 1 mile access to outdoor recreation. 74% of your population is within 1 mile, 10 minutes of a park, which is a good number. And this heat map shows your population and how many people in it have access. So the darker orange represents more people having more opportunities for access. And so you can see in the lighter shades where there might be opportunities for investments based upon providing more equitable access to amenities. We also used a tool called Placer AI, which uses anonymous cell phone data collected in aggregate. So we never see specific people, specific phone numbers, but it tells us who's visiting different places, where they're coming from, where they went to, how long they stayed. And you can start to get some really interesting trends that helps you prioritize capital investments as well as operating investments when we're talking about when are things open. So we reviewed 7 locations with this data: Anderson, Creekside, Discovery, Panorama, Paramount, Prospect were the parks, and then we also reviewed the recreation center. So through the recreation center and the 6 parks, you had 765,000 visits in the last year. The top 3 parks for visitation were Anderson, Prospect, and Discovery. And visitation follows a strong seasonal pattern with clear summer peaks, except for the rec center that likes January. So here's some data about visitation by months. So you can see here, Anderson Park is your one that's getting the most visitation. August is the biggest peak by month. It's the strongest by far. The blue bar there is the Wheat Ridge Recreation Center. So, and Wheat Ridge Recreation Center has fairly consistent visitation. It actually dips in the summer a bit. And so, and it has a peak in January, but it also has surprisingly a peak in May, another peak in May. So there's some interesting insights here for when you're planning programs and also when you might consider planning closures. Next slide, please. Yeah, one slide too far. This is visitation by hours. So what are the most popular hours? So Wheat Ridge, obviously it's at the rec center, it's gonna be driven by when is it open, but your after work crowd is pretty strong. And what I also found really surprising is from the Placer AI data, your rec center crowd is actually coming from within 2 to 5 miles. So even though it's this gorgeous regional facility, its biggest draw is still your local residents, which is awesome. Yep, and then if you look at dwell time, how long are people spending in your parks? And Anderson Park is getting, most people are spending about 15 to 29 minutes there. And your rec center is obviously getting people for a much longer time, which also speaks to some of the capacity issues that are coming up a lot in the rec center. People are not only visiting in high numbers, they're staying for longer periods of time. So generally speaking, there's some really interesting data insights from all of the level of service analysis tied to the Parks and Rec Center that help guide recommendations for investments in programs and capital. And it's certainly data that staff will be able to use compellingly over the next 10 years as they're making their annual operation decisions. For facility, we did, with our partner Populous, we did a similar type of assessment of these 8 facilities. And we looked at their layout, their maintenance, their functionality, and future potential. And so for these, what we found was common themes are, the biggest one is space constraints and facility capacity. Your facilities are popular, they're well used, and they are full. Group fitness spaces, both workout rooms as well as weightlifting rooms, We're undersized and there's desire for more of them. Administrative spaces were also insufficient. And I know it's not a fun thing, but storage does matter. And storage was also limited. But as a common theme, they're generally well maintained and in generally good condition with dated finishes. So strategic priorities. So after we did all of this community engagement and after we did all of this assessment of programs and facilities, what is it that the department should focus on? And so we developed strategic priorities that are high-level goals that the department can do over the next 10 years to really achieve what it wants with its system. It's not meant to replace a strategic plan, so this isn't going to be a detailed annual strategic plan type of priorities, but they are things that can provide you general guidance. And so the strategic priorities that are being recommended moving forward are the following. Reinvest in aging facilities and infrastructure. And it's important to do this now before they get into disrepair, because it's cheaper to make, and just like with streets, it can be cheaper to invest in it before it's absolutely falling apart than to wait for it to fall apart and need replacement. Expand and diversify recreation programs. There's a desire for it, and your community clearly values the recreation programs. You're already doing amazing. You already have an amazing catalog of offerings, and people want more and would support more. Advance aquatics access and sustainability. People love your swimming. They love your swimming program. They wish you had more pools, more pool time. Yeah, and generally speaking, and also when we look at your pools objectively, especially the Anderson pool, it's in desperate need of investment, serious investment. More pools, more lifeguards. Yes, yes, and the aquatics recommendations also address lifeguards firing, so yes. Strengthening trail and greenway connectivity. Open space, your trails, and specifically your trees and tree canopy all scored very highly in community engagement and are extremely valued. And so any investments you make into that system would be heavily supported by data. Increasing access, equity, and inclusion are always important goals that would be supported. And it's important to realize that ADA access is an important part of this. And so when we say access, equity, and inclusions, we're not just talking about the types of programs that are being offered. There are specific capital items included with this. Pursuing strategic acquisitions and partnerships is important because you're near build out. And not only are you at near build out, real estate is so expensive. And so strategic partnerships with, say, school system or any other community partners willing to let you use their property and vice versa could be really beneficial for leveraging and extending your reach to your community. Planning for long-term sustainability and funding is important too. This is, again, it's expensive to operate a parks and recreation system, especially one as high performing as Wheat Ridge. This not only encompasses financial sustainability, but also your staffing sustainability. Capital recommendations are also a major part of this pathway document. And so the capital recommendations, they're really split into two categories. There's the broader system-wide capital recommendations, and then there are facility-specific ones. So for general parks recommendations, expanding your access into underserved areas, enhancing comfort and seasonal appeal, and strengthening trail visibility and safety. You could do this throughout your system and really be making strong investments supported by the community and really by, as your consultant team, our recommendations for you. You have beautiful trails you have beautiful parks, trails nearby with just a little bit of connectivity that could really help. And then wayfinding is always something that can that can help so that people who are navigating your system not only know where they are, where they can get to, but then they can also potentially know a little bit more about your community. You can throw in historical elements. There were also calls for specialized parks, new things. There is demand for a new off-leash dog park somewhere, centrally located, inclusive playgrounds. And then, you know, exploring pump track opportunities could be a really cool thing that the system could do. When it comes to park-specific recommendations, it's really hard to summarize all of these because we did have recommendations for each of your parks. But here's some of the big ones. At Anderson Park, improving ADA access and lighting, and considering ways to increase activation such as fitness features and creekside interpretation elements. At Prospect Park, there's shoreline restoration could go a long way, as well as lighting, and then perhaps expansion of pollinator gardens. There's also a recommendation to explore westward expansion for additional open space. People love your open space. At Discovery Park, again, improving trail connections and seasonal landscaping, and perhaps enhanced sensory and play features for all ages. As far as open space recommendations go, this plan is really meant to build upon and complement the very detailed open space plan that was just completed very recently. And so though there are specific callouts that are building upon specific recommendations in the open space plan, I think it's really important to emphasize this doesn't replace the open space plan, because really the open space plan is still valid, it's still recent, and it's detailed with both recommendations as well as capital costing. But at the Wheat Ridge Greenwell, ADA upgrades at key trailheads could go a long way. Security lighting could help, as well as parallel natural surface trails that are good for runners, as well as pathways that bikers can utilize. And then wayfinding can go a long way. Lewis Meadows, also, there's recommendations for trail development along Lena Gulch, riparian and habitat and floodplain restoration, and then formalization of access points and native planting enhancements. And these are all supported and called out in the open space plan as well. Facility recommendations at the rec center, probably some of your biggest investments to consider are expansions to the gymnasium, upgrades to fitness, the administrative and storage area enhancements and expansions, as well as locker room improvements. At the Anderson Building and Outdoor Pool, unfortunately, you probably need to be considering a full-blown pool replacement as well as the filtration support. There's opportunities for facility and staff upgrades within the building, as well as program and site activation elements. The gym, for example, the gym right now is designed to be as multi-use as possible, which means it's not good for any of those potential multi-uses. It's too small. And so perhaps figuring out a better way to stripe it and utilize it so it could be a master at something is a potential example for how you could activate it better without full-blown reconstruction. And then at the Active Adult Center, this one perhaps could use a different expansion and layout reconfiguration. The interior is probably one of your most dated in terms of finishes, furnitures, layouts. And so their interior upgrades could really be successful there. And then visibility and technology could also help there, investments there to make it a little bit more visible and a little bit more modern on the inside. So that's a lot of the meat that's in that plan. What do we have next? So right now we're doing capital costing for the major recommendations. And so that process is underway with the goal to have that completed in July. Once we have capital costing completed, the meat and bulk of the content of the pathway document is completed. And then we'll go into document design. And we take document design pretty seriously here because the pathway document serves two roles. It is a planning document for staff, but it's also a communication document for the community. And a well-designed, well-written, well-laid-out document is an accessible document. It draws people in to read it because it's interesting and visually appealing, and then it keeps them and educates them because they can actually navigate it. And so document design is something we pride ourselves on and take a lot of effort into. And once it's designed, we'll bring it back here and show it to you and get your feedback, make any changes you all recommend, and hopefully get it adopted. So, thank you.
All right. Do we have any questions or comments? Counselor Hoppy?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I would like to say that the question was, do we have any suggestions for the plan? I think you guys have done a good job gathering the information. You have, identified the strategic priorities. I don't have any suggestions. I look forward to seeing the final document and the final product. I am just so thankful to our community for turning in 414 surveys. It's big, and we appreciate it, and we know that we have been sending you surveys on a lot of things lately, so thank you for participating in this one. And then my only other thing that I want to point out is that Peak, you said looking at some potential partnerships. So Peak School on 44th and Kipling, they have a pump track on that school. And so it may be worth exploring a partnership with them to utilize that pump track.
Counselor Ohm?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. A couple questions. One is I'm looking at the map and the happiness, this is for outdoor recreation.
Mm-hmm.
The heat map, yeah. And I guess I'm not sure I understand Happiness Gardens being outdoor recreation versus I know the backside of Color Strand is an active soccer area that Parks and Rec programs, but it's not included on this.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Sorry, I can get back to it. I just didn't know if you wanted to take that or you want me to.
Yeah, why not? Let's get to the map so we can see it.
It's very slow.
How much?
It likes it over here.
There it is.
Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah, so the 1 mile access to outdoor recreation. And so, if you please repeat.
Yeah. So the Happiness Gardens is just community gardens. So people are just kind of maybe using their hands a little bit, hoeing or something, pulling weeds versus they're not really walking. They're very, I would say, pretty stationary.
Yeah.
And that's included as an outdoor recreation area versus Color Strand, the north half of Color Strand. The park actually programs that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, for soccer. I've seen a lot of soccer games. My daughter used to play soccer there on the weekends and stuff, but it's not included on this map. And so I'm a little confused of what is outdoor recreation.
And I can speak to it first, and then perhaps if you have anything else in terms of how Barry Dunn utilizes this information. But we use, when we're, for example, writing grants and we need to obtain this type of information, there's a Trust for Public Land score online, and they utilize this information that's really, they get the data from our parks that we own and operate. So we don't own and operate Color Strand, so they wouldn't know that we use that space. And I don't know if that's where Barry Dunn takes the data from that's utilized in this map. I would assume so. But that's how, as JR mentioned before, sometimes we have the information and we have to utilize it to tell our story. Because again, when we're looking for grants or when we're talking about trying to acquire the Color Strand and Wilmore Davis properties, for example, we have to tell that story that, yes, it looks like on this map that folks in the Wilmore Davis area have a park nearby, but it's a community garden that some people utilize, but they don't utilize it in the same way that we use a park. So we just have to share that information, but that's data that's online nationally. We get the score, like I think you said it was 73% of our residents have the 10-minute walk to parks, and that's a pretty high score nationally, I believe.
Yes, very good.
And on the other side, I would be interested in seeing a reverse of this where it shows the darkest colors, like here's the need. However you want to, I want to really shine a light of like, these are the areas that really need something. And yes, I am concerned about if the Happiness Gardens is skewing that, it makes the case for like, hey, we really need a park over in this area, but it kind of looks like, oh, well, you kind of already have one. So that's, you're right. That's what I'm trying to do. But thank you.
I think that's good feedback too, because I think we could add, that map exists on the website, the Trust for Public Land website as well. So we could include both and maybe even include like an asterisk with some detail of our interpretation. That would be a good to include in the plan. So thank you. That's helpful.
Councilor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Do have to say that reading over this document here, it's I found it to be reassuring and ambitious. It really is quite a thorough look at the sort of the state of our parks facilities. I do have some concerns about maybe utilization of some of the parks that are not in the top 5. Can you discuss at all what you were able to find out about some of the smaller parks? And I'm thinking of some of the smaller parks that are frankly underutilized.
Yeah. So for the smaller parks, we did look at their amenities and their assets and what they had there, and we were able to score each of those parks based upon the amenities that they were offering. And so when it comes to capital recommendations for each of those parks, even the small ones, we do have specific recommendations for some of the improvements for each of them.
Will we have a chance to look at that?
Yes, we have that information and we can share the complete document with you all before we come back to you with for adoption. Yeah.
So this includes not just some of the smaller little pocket parks like the one in my neighborhood that is frankly way underutilized. And then some of the other fields like the ball fields. Do we know how many hours that kids are out practicing baseball on the ball fields? That kind of stuff.
I don't know that we have that level of detail for all of those parks because the Placer AI data that gives us the number of people that utilize each park, we did some of our parks, but we didn't utilize it on all of them. I think just because of capacity and what Barry Dunn was able to provide us. And they gave us actually more than they usually give to other communities, I believe. Initially gave us like 3 parks and I said, hey, can you do a few more? So they went kind of above and beyond to give us that data, but they don't typically do every park in a system.
Okay. Well, and that is helpful. And I'm glad that that first map that was up there showed the fact that when you look north of I-70, there are no parks in the city, in that part of Wheat Ridge. There are no parks at all.
Quick question before we go to Councilor Snell. As we were looking at this and we look at the heat map, the Lutheran Legacy Campus, when that is built out and we have 20% of parks, would that count on this? Because I guess it's not technically Wheat Ridge Park, right?
Yeah, it will not if it's not owned and operated by the city, but it again is a story we can tell.
Okay.
It will be open to the public, so yeah, maybe it's a separate map that we put together that has all public accessible parks, owned or not owned by the city, might be helpful.
Right, absolutely, great. Councilor Snell.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and thank you for this presentation. This is super thorough, and I appreciate all the detail. A couple of questions. Thinking about some of the recommendations, the centrally located inclusive playground, do you happen to know the new playground that's at the green? Are there any accessibility considerations with that one?
Yeah, that playground's fully accessible. Yep.
Great, that's good. That's a good one. And then I think I heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, did I hear mention earlier in the presentation something about an expansion of the rec center? Or did I make that up?
Yeah, I think it's just, it's part of the recommendations.
Got it, okay. No specific, like, other than storage and office space and.
Yeah, there are some specific, there's more that you'll see in detail when you see the full plan, for sure. Definitely adding to fitness area, gymnasium space. Obviously, we have a little bit of concern with the footprint because the further we go out with the building, it impacts parking, it impacts the field. So a lot of considerations there. But I also want to speak to the playground at the Green at 38th. It is accessible, but certain communities have inclusive playgrounds that are specifically designed for people with disabilities. It is not that. So I just want to be really clear about that.
Councilor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. One last question on one of the items under strategic goals. It says pursue strategic acquisitions and partnerships. Can you tell us a little bit about what that looks like?
Yes, there are, just kick me if I'm not supposed to.
Yeah,
say
okay,
something.
sure.
There are, properties right now that I know that you all are having discussions about, in terms of enhancing or expanding your system, because there's a strategic opportunity to partner with a school district or acquire a property that a school district is leaving. And so, these opportunities will come up, and some of them we can predict and some of them we're aware of, but some of them you won't. This is a 10-year plan. But when you're at build out, when you're trying to, and things are as expensive as they are, these strategic acquisitions and partnerships as they become available are critical for cost effectively providing services to your community.
So I think very specifically talking about Wilmore Davis and Color Strand and how we utilize those fields for athletics. And if we lose them, we have a problem with our athletics programming. We don't have other land to acquire at this point. I think you can also look at some of the recent acquisitions along Kipling that we've completed. And those are things that, again, they come up. We don't necessarily know or plan for them, but we look at them strategically and we make them happen if we can. But additionally, partnerships, not even just land, but programmatically, we can create partnerships as well.
And I guess that was my question. When I think of a strategic partnership, I think more of in terms of an organization supplying sponsorship money, something like that. Because all of these things we're looking at are expensive, and one of the questions that I was a little disappointed was not asked when we did surveys is like, if everybody would like to see additions and more amenities, but if we have to increase fees or somehow raise money to pay for these, are you as supportive now that you know it's going to cost more money?
Sure, and we can also ask those questions moving forward as well, as we did on What's Up Wheat Ridge not too long ago when we did increase fees. Before we did it, we talked to the community, so we could do that thing for sure.
Couple other partnerships or strategic ideas that we're looking at, and it also addresses your concern about no park amenities north of I-70, right? We are working with RTD to see if we can purchase excess property that they have up there for a park for that neighborhood. We're also working on some fundraising opportunities for an outdoor pool, maybe even naming rights. I know that's a little taboo, it has been maybe in government for many years, but I think it's something that we should look at. And so, yeah, so we're looking at, we're working with a couple, I don't want to give anything away right now, but we have some promising ideas about maybe some funding for the outdoor pool.
Anybody else? Councilor Ohm.
Is Creekside north of I-70 or south of I-70? South? Okay, thank you.
Do you have the comments and recommendations you guys need on your feedback? I will say, just on my own behalf, it's fantastic to see, and I think it says a lot about your leadership, Director O'Donnell, that you are punching above your weight, and it shows, and I think our residents notice that and think that our Parks Department are doing a phenomenal job. So thank you. Keep it up. I believe that's it. Okay. We will move on to staff reports. City Manager?
Nothing else from me this evening, Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay.
States.
Elected officials reports. Do we have any elected officials reports? Going once. Counselor Larson?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And I would just like to fill in some of the things that have happened over the past couple of weeks. 2 weeks ago, City Manager Goff and I attended the Colorado Municipal League Annual Conference, and I took away a whole bunch of really good ideas. I met some very interesting people from other places in Colorado that have a different approach to things. We'll put it that way. But it was a very, very valuable use of all of our time. And I'd have to also recognize the award that our Mayor Starker, got at the CML conference. He was awarded the Sam Mamet Award, which cites individual integrity, civility, empathy, service, and local leadership. And I can't think of a better person to win that award than our mayor. And the other thing was the Ridge Fest that happened a week ago, and attended that. I was manning the token booth, selling tokens for beer, which is always exciting. And I think I saw more different personal identification cards than I've ever seen in one place. It was a very, very interesting day, and it didn't rain. I thought that was a big plus.
Thank you. Any counselors? Counselor Rom? Counselor Hoppy?
I was just going to ask if Manager Goff could give us an update. We do have some plans for that intersection on 38th and Kipling.
Yeah, there's a couple different plans. We are looking at that for a potential red light camera, but also there's will be some improvements potentially as part of the 38th Avenue West program to add additional turn lanes going. I guess when if you're going north and south, or south, I think, off of 38. So hopefully that will improve. But yeah, we're very concerned about that intersection as well. And it makes it difficult that it is CDOT, we're sharing it with CDOT, and they control the timing, and we're trying to work with them on allowing us to use photo radar and on their infrastructure as well.
Counselor Snell?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Just a couple of things. I wonder if Manager Goff could give us just a quick update on the car wash situation. Have they ceased operation temporarily?
They have. The car wash, Auto Wash, is that their name? Auto Wash, I believe, on 44th. They voluntarily agreed to shut down for 90 days so that they could work on logistics and solutions for the noise that the neighborhood is experiencing there. So I don't have the exact date, but it's through the end of September-ish. They will be doing some intermediate testing as we go, but they will give us notice of when that happens. But they are shut down right now.
Got it. Thank you. I just wanted to hear the latest, and thanks for that. Kudos to Local Works for putting on an excellent Ridge Fest. Entertainment was great. We had a lot of great representation of all of the talent and talented artists that we have in our community. And then just a quick note of the flooding tragedy in my home state of Texas. I just wanted to send out a quick bit of love and concern for them. The river that flooded was a river that I spent a lot of time on, a lot of my formative years there. And I just wanted to just say, keep them in your thoughts. Anytime a community is affected like that, we come together and try to help out. So good thoughts to them. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see anybody else, so I will just echo kudos to Local Works. They did a phenomenal job. Ridgefest was amazing. I see a lot of head shaking. I saw everybody there. It's a great opportunity for our community to come together. Great music. I believe Mestizo won for the second year in a row. So congratulations to them. Another great local business doing a phenomenal job. As Councilor Rome said, I will say we do need to slow down a little bit in our community, make sure we're taking care of each other. I saw quite a bit of traffic over the weekend, and just making sure that we're really taking care of our neighbors and reaching out whenever we can, especially now that it's a little bit hotter outside. If you've got seniors in your neighborhood, see if you can reach out for them. And I just want to give a shout out to my wife. It's her birthday today. So happy birthday to her, and I will take her out to dinner as soon as we get out of here. So we will wrap up for the evening. We will be back here next Monday for a regular meeting in Chambers here at 6:30, 7 days from today, which is the 14th, I believe. So we will see you then. Thank you.